The following program is brought to you by the Internet Broadcasting Organization. Nothing stated by Steve Bartlett during the Fight Back with Steve show is intended to be legal advice, and appearing on the show does not create an attorney-client relationship with Steve Bartlett. Before taking legal action, it is advisable to consult with an attorney of your choice. The views and opinions expressed by the callers and guests of the Fight Back with Steve show are solely opinionated by those individuals and are not necessarily the expressions and viewpoints of Steve Bartlett or Talkwat Studios.
It's Monday night, and you know what that means. It's time to fight back. Hi, I'm Steve Bartlett, and once again, I'm your host at 9 o'clock every Monday night on Fight Back with Steve Bartlett, where I talk about whatever the hell I'm in the mood to talk about at any given time. Hopefully, I educate. Hopefully, I entertain. Hopefully, I stimulate the little gray cells in your brain to start thinking about things. But I'm here every Monday night. I'd love it if you are with me as well. So, I got a joke for you. It's the ultimate Republican joke. It's the Republican favorite joke in the world. So, you ready for me, Gary?
I'm ready.
Okay. Who's that? There's a voice. It's God coming down. No, it's the producer, Gary. Anyway. Ooh, okay, I'm scared. Okay, here we go. Gary, the ultimate Republican joke. You ready?
Lay it on me.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Ben.
Ben who?
Benghazi.
Ha, I've heard that before.
You get it? Benghazi. Okay, you got to say it. Benghazi, Benghazi, Benghazi. It's like Beetlejuice. You say it 3 times, and you know the ghost of Ronald Reagan will appear to you.
What was it? Can you give it?
You say Benghazi, 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 and the ghost of Ronald Reagan will come to you.
I have never heard that before.
Well, Ronald Reagan, he was the former president of the United States who's very popular with conservatives. I know you're young, but he was kind of famous.
Yeah, wasn't he like an actor or something?
He was an actor who pretended to be president.
So
Anyway.
he acted as president?
Yeah, okay, exactly.
Greatest
Anyway,
role.
Republicans' favorite thing in the world is Benghazi. You ask them any question, the answer is Benghazi. Like, excuse me, sir, what time is it? If the answer is Benghazi, the odds are you're talking to a Republican. If you ask a person, what's your favorite color? And their color is red, odds are you're not talking to a Republican. If you say, what is your favorite color? And their answer is Benghazi, then what are you talking to? Talking to a Republican, right?
That is correct.
Okay. Like what's your name?
You want me to, Fred.
Okay, if you say your name is Fred, then you're not a Republican. If you say your name is Benghazi, then you're a Republican. Benghazi, Benghazi, Benghazi. It is the biggest scandal of all time. According to the Republican talking heads, it's bigger than Watergate. It's bigger than Iran-Contra. It's bigger than the Teapot Dome scandal back in the 1920s. It is bigger. It's a bigger tragedy than the Holocaust. It's worse than slavery. The Benghazi scandal is worse than when Pontius Pilate washed his hand and crucified Christ. It is the biggest horrific thing to ever happen to mankind. Did you know that?
No, I did not.
Well, that's because you're not watching Fox News. You watch Fox News, you know that Benghazi, Benghazi, Benghazi is the most important thing in the world. Forget starving children worldwide, forget warfare, forget famine, forget global warming, forget unemployment, forget the bad economy, forget all of that. None of it matters. The only thing in the world that matters is Benghazi. Got it?
Okay.
Okay? And they think this is the biggest scandal of all time. And what happened was really bad. Our embassy was attacked. Our ambassador was killed along with 2 other Americans. that is a terrible tragedy. But the Republicans right now are exploiting it for political gain. Now, this isn't the first time, and they're making as if Obama's the worst president who ever lived because the Benghazi thing occurred on his watch. So they're obsessed saying he's the worst president ever. This would never happen under a conservative president. Something like this would never happen under our hero, Ronald Reagan. But let's go in the time machine. Let's go back in time, back to the 80s when women had teased hair and synth pop was really popular and Michael Jackson was really big. Let's go back to the 80s. Okay, we're back in 1983. I'm about to graduate from high school.
Steve, you just blew my mind.
Okay. I'm about to graduate from high school, 1983, and what was going on at the time was there was a civil war going on in Lebanon. Capital of Lebanon is Beirut. And we had an embassy there and then Ronald Reagan was president back in 1983, and what happened was we were victimized by a terrorist attack back in 1983. And as a result of that, 63 people were killed at the embassy due to a car bomber drove up, it exploded, 63 people were killed. Okay, that was in 1983. Now, the Democrats didn't go ape and start accusing Ronald Reagan as to being responsible for it or that he's the worst president who ever lived because of what happened in Beirut, or that there was some horrible scandal, or that they lied, or anything like that. What the country did is they got behind the president and they gave him authority to give more money to security in Lebanon at the time. Okay, but the country didn't go crazy. The Republicans didn't say we should impeach Ronald Reagan because 63 lost their lives when the embassy was bombed due to a terrorist attack in Beirut in 1983. That hypocrisy has only come to light now that we have an African-American Democrat president in the White House. Now, so that's what happened. Was Reagan to blame for it? No. Things happen. We live in a very dangerous world, and when our diplomats go into high conflict areas, they know there's always a chance of being in harm's way, especially when there's a war going on. Okay? So Reagan should not be criticized for the lives that were lost in 1983 any more than Obama should be held responsible for the disaster and the consequences of what happened over in Benghazi in Libya. Now, let's go another year from 1983. Let's go to 1984. Okay? Now, as George Bush brilliantly said when he was president of the United States, I'm talking about the idiot's son, not his father. When George Bush brilliantly said, "Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, and you won't get fooled again." When he said that famously, it makes me remind about what happened in 1984. In 1984, there was a car bomb that exploded at the embassy in Beirut, Lebanon. Again, 24 people died. So we lost 63 people to a car bomb in Lebanon in 1983. And then 1 year later, we get hit again. Terrorists hit us the exact same way again 1 year later in Beirut under Reagan's watch. Now think about it. What would happen if we got hit in Benghazi again under Obama? What would the Republicans have been doing? They'd be screaming up and down, running down the halls crazily saying, "We have to impeach this guy. He's the worst president who ever lived." Oh, they're already doing that. Anyway, it would be bigger than anything. It would be bigger than the Super Bowl. It would be bigger than the resurrection of Christ to Republicans if we got hit in Benghazi again. Yet in 1984, 1 year after we were attacked by terrorists in Beirut, Lebanon at our embassy, the same damn thing happened again. The same damn thing happened under Reagan's watch. And you know what? Nobody blamed him. No one gave him hell. No one criticized him. We came together as a country and condemned the violence. Now, who was behind the attacks over in the embassy in Lebanon? The people behind the attacks in Lebanon were the Iranian Islam jihadists. Iran was given aid to the one side in the civil war over in Lebanon, and they're the ones who were responsible for the actions that killed Americans in 1983 and killed Americans in 1984. Okay? Remember that. That's really important. It was Iran who was in charge of this. They were the responsible ones for killing Americans. Well, Republicans think of Benghazi as the biggest scandal in American history, or world history for that matter. But let me tell you about a real scandal that occurred in the 80s under the chosen one, Ronald Reagan. Okay? It's called the Iran-Contra scandal. Now, a lot of the younger people might not remember it, but I remember being glued to the television during the hearings on the Iran-Contra scandal. And let me tell you what actually happened here, okay? Now, Iran, these are the guys who took hostages and held them took American hostages under Jimmy Carter. See the movie Argo if you haven't. And then bombed our embassy twice in the 80s, okay? Ronald Reagan, who tried to be the tough guy cowboy, there was American policy at the time saying that the United States will not ever negotiate with terrorists. That if you take hostages, we will not negotiate with you. We will destroy you. You surrender. We do not negotiate with the people who take hostages. We won't play that game. Now, that puts our people in harm's way. That might not be advisable, might not be moral, but that is American policy. And Reagan was a staunch defender of that policy, saying we will never negotiate with a terrorist. We will never negotiate for hostages. But you know what he did? What Ronald Reagan did secretly, his administration secretly sold arms to the Iranians, the Iranians, however you want to pronounce it, sold them arms in exchange for hostages that were being held in Lebanon, totally against American foreign policy. But they did it anyway, okay? Sold arms to our enemies as a reward for backing the kidnappers in Iran, okay? Huge scandal for doing that. But not only did they do that, but a guy named Oliver North, who worked for the Reagan administration, came up with a really sleazy idea. And he said, rather than us just selling the arms to them cheaply, let's make a profit on the deal. After all, the Republicans are always interested in profit. And what did they decide to do? They decided, we're going to jack up the prices of the arms, make a lot of money for selling the arms for the hostages, and then we'll take the profits from that, and we will use the profits from that transaction, and we'll use it to fund the rebels in Nicaragua to help overthrow the democratically elected government there that we opposed. Now, this was illegal. It was illegal because there was a federal law prohibiting it. We were not supposed to fund the Contras in Nicaragua. But Oliver North didn't care what the law was. Who cares what the law is? I'm going to do it because I'm a right-wing patriot and we hate communists. So the Reagan administration sold arms to our enemy who bombed us twice for hostages that were taken by their request, and then used it to illegally fund monies to overthrow a democratically elected government in opposition to not only world law, but American law as well. Okay? Now, Reagan went on television back in November 1986 and told the American people that we did not trade arms for hostages. But then in March 1987, when facts came to light, he said, well, I was kind of wrong on that one. Yes, we did trade arms to hostages, but I didn't know anything about what was going on in Nicaragua. I had no idea what they were doing in Nicaragua. I had no idea. I didn't know. They didn't tell me. My administration was rogue. They didn't tell me. Now, here's Ronald Reagan, the hero of the Republican Party, the man who they give credit for single-handedly defeating communism, for single-handedly bringing down the Berlin Wall. He's the guy who fixed our economy all by himself on his horse with his cowboy hat. The greatest president of all time, and yet they kept him in the dark on a huge foreign policy maneuver. Here he turns into Sergeant Schultz from Hogan's Hero. I know nothing, I see nothing. Okay? But that was what his claim was. And even though his Department of Defense chairperson, the Secretary of Defense, Caspar Weinberger, later claimed that Ronald Reagan knew all along. And Oliver North said that Ronald Reagan knew all along about what was going on and approved it. At the time, during the scandal, there was no proof, or else Reagan would have been impeached. Now, how big was this scandal? Well, it was pretty damn big. Heavy hitters in the administration went down for it. 11 people were convicted despite a lack of cooperation from the White House. White House shredded documents, refused to turn over things, or claim things were national security to stop the congressional investigation as to what actually occurred. But people went down pretty hard. Pretty big players, not minor leaguers. Caspar Weinberger, Secretary of Defense, convicted. Robert McFarlane, National Security Advisor to the President of the United States, convicted. Admiral Poindexter, National Security Advisor to the President of the United States, convicted. Elliot Abrams, the Assistant Secretary of State to the President, convicted. And Bill Casey, who was the head of the CIA, he died during the hearings. He was so stressed out about it, but they say the evidence against him was overwhelming, and he too would have been convicted. He was indicted. Okay, so who do we have here? We have the Secretary of Defense. We have the two national security advisors. We have the head of the CIA. And we have the State Department all involved in illegally and intentionally selling arms to our enemies. And they all participated in the cover-up. They committed perjury considering it. This rogue government under Reagan, the great communicator, wasn't in communication with his own administration. The only two people who claimed that they knew nothing about it was Ronald Reagan, the president, and his vice president, George Herbert Walker Bush, who became the next president of the United States after Reagan's term was over. He was running for president, and George Herbert Walker Bush also said, I know nothing about it. Now, the reason this is when he ran on his campaign to run was, I am the king of foreign policy. Nobody in America has more foreign policy experience than I do. I was the ambassador to China. I was the head of the CIA. These are the reasons that Reagan made me vice president, because of my foreign policy experience. He was just a governor of California without any foreign policy experience, so he tapped into my expertise by being the head of the CIA and former ambassador to China by making me vice president. And that's why I should be your president when Reagan's term is over. That's what he campaigned on. But he claimed that this huge foreign policy decision to trade arms for hostages and to then take the proceeds and use them to illegally fund the Contras in Nicaragua, Bush claimed he knew nothing about it. Secretary of Defense knew about it. Secretary of State knew about it. The National Security Advisors knew about it. And the State Department knew about it. Everybody knew about it. The CIA knew about it. Everybody knew about it except for George Herbert Walker Bush. For whatever reason, I guess he thought that when they were whispering behind closed doors, they were planning a surprise party for his birthday or something like that. But George Herbert Walker Bush claimed that he knew nothing about it. Of course he would claim that, because obviously he would have been impeached too if he was part of the scandal and the cover-up. Okay? Whatever happened as a result of this? Bush became president after he claimed he didn't know. Well, later his diaries showed that he did know, in fact, and that he lied to the American people when he claimed that he didn't know about the arms for hostages or funneling the money to Nicaragua. Not only that, but what did he do? He did something really sleazy. He pardoned all of those in the administration who were convicted for the corruption. He pardoned them. It was a quid pro quo. You'd say that I didn't do anything wrong, and then when I become president, I will pardon you. That's exactly what happened. That's what a real scandal was about. Lying, breaking federal law intentionally, convictions for it, and then a cover-up followed by pardoning for as an award for covering it all up. Okay? Now, what's going on now pales in comparison. Folks, there is no scandal. Benghazi is a myth. It is not a scandal. As Goebbels said, the propaganda minister of Germany said during Nazi Germany, Goebbels said famously, if you repeat a lie often enough, it eventually becomes the truth. And that's what the Republicans are doing. They're repeating the lie of Benghazi being a scandal over and over and over again, and Americans are believing it. The Republican Party, the people who watch Fox News, they're completely in step with those who claim that Benghazi is the biggest scandal of all time. They believe the lie. They don't care about looking at proof. They don't care about all the studies by the Free Press or by the Senate committees that have determined that there is nothing scandalous about Benghazi. They believe what Rush Limbaugh tells them and the other right-wing hacks on the radio tell them. They believe what they see on Fox News, the lies that are told over and over and over again, sold to them with the same candor as Madison Avenue sells products to people. They believe the crap by Darrell Issa, the richest 1%, the richest person in all of Congress, of the 535 members of the United States Congress. He is by far the wealthiest, who's doing hearing after hearing condemning Obama for being corrupt. People believe it because they're sold these lies over and over and over again. And what I want to do tonight is I'm going to bust those lies and tell you what the actual truth is. So let's see what the lies are. Yes, tragically, Chris Stevens, our ambassador, was murdered in an act of terrorism. But this is what they claim. First of all, the Republicans claim, or the right-wing conspiracy claims, or whatever I want to call them, I'll just say the right. The right claims that Al-Qaeda was behind the attack. Survey says, there is no evidence that Al-Qaeda was behind the attacks at all. Actually, what the evidence shows is that it was a local group of Sharia militants in Libya who were behind the actual attacks on Benghazi. Al-Qaeda had nothing to do with it. Once again, this is how the right works. How they try to say that Al-Qaeda was involved with Iraq, and that's why we invaded Iraq, even though it had nothing to do with each other. Iraq had nothing to do with Al-Qaeda. And likewise, what happened in Benghazi also had nothing to do with Al-Qaeda. Lie number two, that the attacks were not a response at all to any video. The video had nothing to do with the attacks. Well, that has been debunked as well. The Senate did a study, and the Senate Intelligence Committee said that there is information out there that part of their investigation turned out facts that showed that the video was a reason for what occurred in Benghazi. Witnesses were then exposed by the press who did investigations, who said that the attacks were done by the local militia and that people were at the gates at the embassy chanting anti-slogans specifically about the video. That's what they were saying. Let's do this because of the video. They weren't saying let's do this because of what happened in 9/11 and we hate America. They were condemning the video. That's what witnesses in the ground who were Libyans were saying they actually observed with their own eyes and their own ears. 3, the right says that the attack was this well-planned, giant, terroristic conspiracy, and that it wasn't just done half-assed and spontaneous. Well, the evidence, according to the Senate, which was a bipartisan committee, determined that there was, the intelligence showed that there was nothing proving that it was pre-planned. In fact, the evidence that they found on the scene shows that it was poorly planned, poorly executed. They didn't have these special weapons. The weapons that were used for the attack were weapons that were readily available on the street at the time in Benghazi. Many Americans escaped from the embassy. A lot of people don't realize that I think 35 Americans escaped from the embassy. And the reason they did this is they were able to get in a Jeep and drive away. If it was a pre-planned, calculated attack, they would have been closed off. Everyone would have been dead. The fact that we were able to escape without too many Americans dying, and any American death is bad, but with only 3 Americans dying because most of them were able to escape, shows that it was a half-ass terrorist attack. It wasn't a planned type of thing like Al-Qaeda would normally do. Here's another lie that Republicans like to say. Republicans like to say that Obama ordered the troops to stand down. That was also debunked by the bipartisan Senate Intelligence Committee. In fact, we didn't stand down. We didn't have time. Our ambassador was dead before we even knew about the attack, before we could even do a response, and then it would take 2 hours for us to actually get there. And we did send people there. We sent a 7-man team to Benghazi, and Americans actually were rescued. The team could not have prevented the death of the ambassador, no matter what would have been done. Well, the Republicans or the right also claims, yeah, but we knew this attack was coming. It was imminent. Everybody knew this attack was going to do it, and the president didn't do anything to protect these people. Well, that's also not true as well. The CIA knew that there was a heightened alert because of the anniversary of 9/11 and actually gave that to the entire world, and all the embassies were on a heightened alert from what they normally would be, but there was nothing specific in the intelligence saying that Benghazi would be specifically attacked. No evidence of that at all. Well, there was a cover-up. Obama covered it all up. There was a cover-up. Again, the committee, the bipartisan committee in the Senate said that there's no evidence of a cover-up, that the talking points that were done by the Obama administration were based upon the intelligence that was provided to them by the CIA, and that was it. That's the only knowledge they had. And the truth is, most of what was said by Susan Rice on the talk show the next day was actually accurate. It wasn't a well-planned attack. It was based in part as a reaction to the video. That's what the evidence actually showed. Now, they claim there's a smoking gun because there was a memo that was sent, and this memo was sent, and the memo specifically says that please comment as a talking point that the protests were about the video and not about a general failure of American foreign policy. Okay? And they're saying that's the big smoking gun, and that is proof that Obama is covering it up, that they said that we want a talking point about the protests being about the video and not about our foreign policy. Now, if you look at what they said, that memo is about the protest. It's not about the attack on Benghazi. It's about the protest. And if you look at the protest around the area, which was Cairo and other areas in the Middle East, were about the video. The memo was not about Benghazi. The memo was about the protests. So there is no smoking gun, and these bastards know it. The right-wing conspirators know it, but they're telling these lies to you over and over again to help their political reasons. And why is this going on? One, they want to rally the base. When they say Obama's the worst president who ever lived and we got to get him out of there, we got to get someone in there, Republicans give money to their candidates. Republicans then give money to the Tea Partiers who want to get in Congress in the next couple months at the election. They love to rally the base beyond. Nothing rallies the base more than the words Benghazi, Benghazi, Benghazi. Two, hurt Obama. Let's hurt his presidency. Let's cripple him in the polls. That way he wouldn't be of any help during the congressional campaign, so that the Democrats lose houses in the House and possibly lose the Senate. Because who wants to hear Obama? We hate him. He's the worst president who ever lived. Three, hurt Hillary Clinton by saying that it's all Hillary's fault as the Secretary of State when she runs for president. Use that as a way to use the fact that she was the Secretary of State as a detriment to her candidacy as opposed to something that's good for her candidacy. And finally, the number one reason why the right wing is so obsessed with Benghazi is to distract the people from knowing that these son of a bitches aren't doing their job in Congress. They spent tens of millions of dollars wasting our money, our millions of dollars on these stupid hearings instead of doing their job. They have not passed a job bill. Since Obama's been president, the Republicans have refused to pass immigration reform, to do anything about the handgun situation. They've refused to do anything about creating jobs or doing anything to help the Americans. What they want to do is keep power and spend your money on a bunch of crap. That's exactly what they're doing. I'm sick of it. And you should be too. I'm not going to be like a lot of people who just get on the bandwagon and say, oh, I'm going to watch Fox News and believe everything they say and go along with the flow and say, I hate Obama too. I'm not going to be like that. I see the injustice. I'm not going to be somebody who just hides his head and say, well, I don't really care about politics, man. I'm just going to watch football. Hey, this is our country. We have to fight to protect it. What am I going to do instead? I'm going to come here every week, and I'm going to tell you that you need to fight back. Thank you. See you next week.
This program was brought to you by the Internet Broadcasting Organization, setting the standard for new media broadcasting.